Pavlov theory of the brain. Pavlov argued that unconditioned reflexes are mediated by connection between sensory and motor nerves at the spinal and lower brain centers of the nervous system. Conditioned reflexes occur when neural pathways in the cortex become part of the circuitry, establishing connection between certain stimuli and responses that had not been interconnected before. The evidence for the importance of the cortex was provided by animals whose cortex were completely removed after they had already acquired a number of conditioned reflexes. These animals, who were kept alive by an attentive keeper for up to 4.5 years, retained their unconditioned reflexes. Their conditioned reflexes disappeared with their cortex, however, and no amount of training could make them return. Pavlov believed that the cortex was the site of conditioned reflexes involving him in the localization of function. Pavlov concluded that the salivary center, however, is not necessary component of conditioned reflexes involving salivation. Pavlov postulated distinct physiological contracts such as food center, the defense center, the cold and heat center, and the motor center. Each center responds in a specific way to stimulation. This response is the unconditioned or innate reflexes. When several centers are stimulated, the direction of stimulation is conditioned by the relative strength of the interacting centers. The food center is obviously a powerful psychological center. It is the protector of individuals' existence. It is evident that in comparison with the food center, the defense center is of less importance. The relative strength of the centers depend on the amount of energy at their disposal. Excitation and inhibition. According to Pavlov, the nerve centers are charged with energy. The conduction of energy from one center to another is called by Pavlov excitation. The center which attracts energy becomes excited. Induction. Once an area is stimulated and irradiates, the neighboring area develop inhibition and force concentration of the stimulated area. This phenomenon is called positive induction. Once an area is inhibited and the inhibition irradiates, the neighboring area develop stimulation and force concentration of inhibition. This is negative induction. Conduction and connection. According to Pavlov, the main function of the nerve system is reflex. Reflex is started by an external agent producing stimulation in the receptor, which is an afferent nerve. When this stimulation is conducted along the path of the afferent nerve to the central part of the nerve system, and then to the afferent nerve, a reaction take place. Under certain circumstances, a given stimulus provoke a definite, always the same reaction. As a rule, the reflex follows the same nerve path. A reflex is the mechanism of a definite connection by means of the nerve system between the phenomena of the external world and the corresponding definite reaction of the organism. Reflexes. According to Pavlov, the basic element of interactions between the organism and the environment is reflex. Positive and negative reflexes. The reflex is positive when the stimulus calls for a process of excitation and negative when a process of inhibition is started. Some positive reflexes such as food, sex provoke movement towards the stimulation object, whereas other provoke movement away from or against harming and destructive stimuli. Reflex and instinct. Both were considered by him innate pattern of behavior. However, the instinct are more complex reflexes, or a chain of them. Pavlov believed that all life is nothing but the realization of one purpose, the preservation of life itself, which may be called the general instinct of life. This general instinct or reflex consists of a number of separate ones. The majority of these reflexes are positive movement reflex towards the condition that favorable for life. The chief grasping reflex is the food reflex. One desired food becomes stated and is abstain from food for a while till a new desire appears. Pavlov distinguished a great number of reflexes. The strongest reflex is the food reflex, and defense reflex. Among other reflexes, Pavlov mentioned the reflex of sex, of freedom, of curiosity, constant and temporary reflex. Pavlov differentiated between constant and temporary reflexes. The unconditional reflexes are constant reflexes, whereas conditional reflexes are temporary reflexes. Reinforcement. The focal point in Pavlov theory is the concept of reinforcement. Repetition of reinforcement is necessary for the establishment, strengthening, and continuation of conditioning response. Temperament. Pavlov attempted to classify temperamental differences in relation to excitation and inhibition. His classification included the excitatory, the inhibitory, and the central or equilibrated type, the last of which could be divided into quiet and lively type. Accordingly, Pavlov divided all his experimental dogs into four categories and believed that a human could be classified in the same way. His division followed the four types suggested by Hippocrates, namely choleric, melancholic, sanguinic, and phlegmatic. Reinforcement. The focal point in Pavlov theory is the concept of reinforcement. Repetition of reinforcement is necessary for the establishment, strengthening, and continuation of conditional responses. Temperaments. Pavlov attempted to classify temperamental differences in relation to excitation and inhibition. His classification included the excitatory, the inhibitory, and the central or equilibrated type, the last of which could be divided into quiet and lively types. Accordingly, Pavlov divided all his experimental dogs into four categories and believed that a human could be classified in the same way. He devised followed the four types suggested by Hippocrates, namely choleric, melancholic, sanguinic, and phlegmatic. The excitable type. The excitable dog that is choleric responds quickly to positive stimuli, becomes easily conditioned, and is not easily inhibited. Pugnacious, passionate, and easily and quickly irritated. The choleric type corresponds to neurasthenia. Inhibitory type. The inhibitory type is the melancholic. To him, every event of life becomes an inhibitory agent. He believes in nothing, hopes for nothing, in everything he sees the dark side. The melancholic type corresponds to the historical. Between these two extreme and psychological types, there are two equilibrated or central or healthy types, the phlegmatic and the sanguinic. The phlegmatic. The phlegmatic is self-contained and quiet, present and steadfast. The sanguinic. The sanguinic is energetic and very productive, but without constantly new stimulation, get bored and fall asleep easily.